Welcome to another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. And let's not waste no more time. Let's get right to it. So, Brian Shaw, three-time NBA champion with the Lakers, started his career in Boston after getting drafted by the Celtics in 1988, okay? That's his rookie card right there. Brian Shaw, 1991 NBA Hoops. There's the back right there. And this is his Skybox card, okay? And there goes his the back for Brian Shaw right there, okay? So he was drafted by the Celtics in 1988, okay? But he signed a one-year contract, but instead of signing for 4 years for $150K a year, $150,000, he actually signed a one-year deal, okay? And there's a story behind that, okay? So there was a rookie scale back in 1988, but the salary cap was much more firmer, okay? So the minimum Brian Shaw could make was $150K a year, okay? And so Danny Manning, who was the first pick, he was making up to $1 million a year, and all the other draft picks leading up to Brian Shaw were making like $400,000 a year, okay? But but the most Brian Shaw could make was $150,000 a year, because the Celtics were paying Larry Bird, they were paying Kevin McHale, they were paying Robert Parrish, Dennis Johnson, Danny Ainge. They were paying those players. And so, no. Check that. There was no rookie wage scale back in 1988, okay? So that's a mistake on our part. There was no rookie wage scale back in 88, okay? So Brian Shaw, he signed a one-year deal for $150,000 and bet on himself, okay? And he was named to the All-Rookie team in 1989. He averaged only 8.6 points per game, but still. So he started 62 games in his rookie year in 1989, okay? And then after the season was over, Boston offered him a 4-year deal for $225,000 a year, okay? And so David Rivers, who got drafted 25th overall in 1988, was making more than him. David Rivers, okay, a guy who played 2 years in the NBA, was making more than Brian Shaw, okay? So Brian Shaw began thinking about playing over in Italy, okay? And the highest paid player overseas was Bob McAdoo, who was making $400,000, okay? And Danny Ferry, who had been drafted by the Clippers in 1989, wasn't going to play for the Clippers. So David Falk, who was his agent, who's also Michael Jordan's agent too, signed him to play over in Italy for $2 million. Okay, and so Brian Shaw, the team that he was going to play for in Italy, they were offering him $1 million. Okay, and so then Brian Shaw told the Celtics that they have 48 hours to match the offer that the Italian league was offering Brian Shaw. Okay, and they never called, and the Celtics never called. So Brian Shaw ended up signing to play for 1 year with Italy, and then after he signed with Italy, Red Auerbach, who was the president, and there's a guy by the name of Jan Volk, who was the general manager. Red Auerbach called Brian Shaw and said, "Hey, we're going to give you what you want, okay? Tear up the contract." And then Brian Shaw was like, "Nah, it's too late. Too late." Brian Shaw signed a contract, and so Brian Shaw had a good year over in Italy, and at the end of the season, he was planning to stay over because the Italian league team he played for said wanted Brian Shaw to tear up the contract because they were going to give him $3 million. Okay, I believe they were going to give him $3 million over 4 years. Okay, and Brian Shaw also said that nobody in the NBA was making over $2 million a year at that time. Okay, so Jan Volk, the GM for the Celtics, flew to Italy and flew to Rome, where Brian Shaw was playing overseas, and they actually signed a contract in the limo. So they actually had a conversation in the limo, and Brian Shaw signed a contract with the Celtics for $1,000,001 over 4 years. Okay, but there was a clause in the contract. But before I get into that clause, Brian Shaw had actually fired his agent. Okay, so Brian Shaw didn't know that the contract that he signed had a clause that said he had to rescind his contract with the Italian league between June 20th and July 20th, okay, of 1990 to honor the contract with the Celtics. And Brian Shaw had already signed his contract with the Italian league. Okay. And so he didn't want to rescind his contract with the Italian league. So what did the Boston Celtics do? The Boston Celtics took him to court. Okay. Yeah, the Boston Celtics took him to court. So it was the NBA, the Celtics, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Brian Shaw. Okay, and needless to say that the courts ruled in favor of the Celtics. So the courts ruled that Brian Shaw was a Celtic, and he went back to Boston for the 1990-91 season. Okay, now he lands back with the Celtics in 1991. Okay, and he averaged 13 points and 7 assists per game with Boston in 1990-91. Okay, so he gets back to Boston. Okay, and they were calling Brian Shaw Benedict Arnold. Okay, they were calling him Benedict Arnold, but Brian Shaw said it was a big business, and he had to do what was in the best interest of Brian Shaw. Okay, so Dennis Johnson had retired. Jim Paxson had retired. So the Celtics had a couple of fresh new faces. Rookie D. Brown. The core was still pretty much there. But But you still had the core of the big three. Then you had Ed Pinckney, Joe Klein, guys like Michael Smith, John Bagley, and so the core of the team was still pretty much there. But every time Brian Shaw touched the ball the first month of the season, he got booed in Boston Garden. Okay. He got booed at Boston Garden. Needless to say, the fans weren't happy that he went overseas to play. And the fact that the Celtics had to go to court to get him to honor his contract in Boston. And the second game of the season, ironically, they played the Bulls, okay? They played the Bulls in the second game of the season at Chicago Stadium. And so it's the final play of the game. It's a close game. Robert Parrish drives, being guarded by Bill Cartwright. Robert Parrish drives, puts up his jump shot. He airballs the jump shot. Brian Shaw gets the rebound and lays it up and in, and the Celtics win the game. Okay. And the Bulls dropped to 0-2 on the season. Okay. So Brian Shaw actually rebounded Parrish's air ball and laid the ball in a come from behind win for the Boston Celtics. Okay. So, yeah, so, but shortly into the 91-92 season, the Celtics, they traded Brian Shaw to the Miami Heat for Sherman Douglas. Okay. So that's how Sherman Douglas ended up in Boston by way of the Brian Shaw trade. Okay. So, Brian Shaw went on to have a pretty good career, 3-time NBA champion with the Lakers. So, but yeah, it was a ugly start at the start of his NBA career, but it eventually got straightened out. So everything worked out for the good. All right, that's it, and that's all for Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. Peace out. God bless. See y'all on the next one. I'm out.